Welcome to the EMA Online pregame podcast as we get set for Tulane to roll into Manhattan this weekend as the Cats and the Green Wave will get a 2 o'clock kickoff, and we should kick off on time this weekend. I haven't checked the weather recently, but early on the returns looked like maybe there was going to be some inadequate weather in the area, but everybody else seems to be confident. Chris Kleiman very confidently on Tuesday said that there wouldn't be any delays, and then I started to kind of turn my head a little bit. I was like, I don't know. Has he seen a weather forecast? But maybe he knows what he's talking about here. It still says AM thunderstorms on Saturday for Manhattan, but doesn't look like that's going to carry too far into the afternoon. So hopefully weather stays out of the equation and K-State can get a nice, clean game, because for game number 3, this is going to be very important for them to figure out, can they throw the ball? Can Chris Tennant kick the ball? And can they just play an entire game basically without having to worry about showing too much like week 1 when they played South Dakota? And now the Missouri concern was, hey, the weather's terrible. So we'll see what they get. I'm looking forward to this kind of being a game that tells us more about the Wildcats. They've gotten off to a strong start this year. They haven't allowed a touchdown yet this season, since we are not counting the Eliah Drinkwitz conundrum that he brought up at the end of the game and everything that went on there. We forgot to talk about it. After everything we talked about over the weekend, we forgot to talk about Drinkwitz deciding to call timeouts and do all this stuff, blah, 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 to try and score a garbage time touchdown. So, Alec, let's start it off with you. What were your thoughts on Mr. Drinkwitz, who some people in the K-State community call Eliah Dorkwitz? I have not called him that for a couple weeks now, and I'm not going to start. But what were your thoughts on Mr. Drinkwitz, who's now 1-1 this season, trying to punch in a touchdown at the end to make it 40-12 instead of 40-6?
Yeah, I mean, I think I turned to you in the press box when he did that, and I was like, that is Bush League. And I think we kind of walked down to the field. It was just the two of us for that post-game press conference, and we were kind of like, yeah, I can't believe he did that. I understand the argument of, you know, you look like you're trying to support your players. You look like you're trying to not give up and still believe in them and what have you. But I just think it's one of those situations where, one, you're putting your players and the other team's players in a position to cause unnecessary injury. And two, like when you think about what the field conditions were for that game, obviously it's incredibly slick with the turf being incredibly wet from all the rain that had happened. And if anyone's ever been on wet field turf before, it's incredibly easy to like slip and fall or fall awkwardly. I just thought it was a little bit irresponsible from him. And I respect him trying to give Mizzou an opportunity to gain some confidence, maybe offensively going into their 3rd game of the year, like this week. And I don't know who Mizzou's playing this week, but I just thought it was I thought it was unnecessary. I respect the desire to try and get points on the board and show you that you believe in your team and everything, but I just thought it was unnecessary. And I think if you were a K-State player, you're probably upset that it happened. And I think if you're a Kansas State coach, you're also probably a little bit upset that it happened. I'm not going to put words in Chris Kleiman's mouth. He seemed to respect the decision post game, but I wouldn't expect him to, you know, stand at a podium after a game and say something along the lines of like, yeah, I thought it was Bush League. I thought it was childish, whatever, because that's just not who Chris Kleiman is. Like, I've only spoke to him 3 or 4 times at this point, but I've quickly gathered that that's not who Chris Kleiman is. So I think that it's one of those things where, yeah, it's great to show that you believe in your players and that you're still trying, whatever, but also the game was over. It was certainly over. There was no chance you were coming back to win the game. And it's one of those situations where you're creating unnecessary chances for injury for not just your players, but the other team. And when your starting quarterback had already left the game with what looked like an injury and then came back, I just didn't think it was necessary.
Well, that's the weird part of it to me, is that I get it if, you know, it's the backups or somebody else in the game, but it was Brady Cook that was out there that he had on the field. It was the starters that were out there that he wanted to try and get into the end zone and give them a touchdown. And like, that's the weird thing to it, is that is just such a, I don't know, I don't want to be so harsh to say that it's a loser's mentality, but that's like the mindset that you have when it is the 2nd and 3rd string guys out in the game. Like that's how you go about it, where, well, let's just try and get them whatever they can. So I didn't like it. I thought it was kind of ridiculous. Like it, because they had their shots to get it in. You get stopped. Okay, just suck it up and take your L with you back to Columbia. They did not want to do that, and unfortunately, that's how we ended up in this spot right now, where they ended up with 12 points instead of the 6 that they deserved. There was also the questionable penalty for roughing the passer on that play, then that kept it alive, because the K-State defense did come out and hold Missouri on that first play, but then with zeros on the clock, they called roughing the passer on Jalen Pickle, and then eventually Missouri was able finally to get it in. So I'm with you. It did not appear that Chris Kleiman was excited about what had gone on there, because the handshake that was shown on TV was very, very short afterwards. But part of that, I think, also had to do with the fact that we had a full halftime during the game on Saturday, where we basically had an hour delay. I think it was right near an hour that the teams had to leave in the second quarter and get ready to come back out. And K-State, they went out there, were ready to play afterwards, and they got it done. I found it odd that we had a full halftime. And my initial thought in the booth was, I almost wonder if Missouri said, no, we want a full halftime. Like, they didn't agree to shortening halftime. And then based off of some of the conversations that I've heard after the game, I would tend to believe that was the case as well. So I think that there were a couple of things that Chris Kleiman was probably just kind of scratching his head on and thinking that, that's just kind of pathetic. Would be the words I would use for it. And I don't know how Chris Kleiman felt exactly, but that quick handshake seemed to be along those lines. So great stuff there.
Maybe it was just one of those things where he was wet and he was cold and he just wanted to get inside, because that would be me in that situation. If he'd been rained on for approximately 3 hours.
That's a good point as well. So you're going to give him benefit of doubt there. That's fine. Whatever. And that's good. That's you're holding things up. All right. Before we get into the Tulane game, let's dive into this as well, because if we're just going to try and go scorched earth on people like Eliah Drinkwitz, I about said Dorkwitz. I didn't though. But Eliah Drinkwitz, let's talk about Pat Forde and his story that he put out yesterday in his 40-yard dash about college football's most and least picturesque stadiums. This came on the heels of, I guess, he wanted to react because College Game Day is going to Appalachian State this weekend, and so they will be in Boone, North Carolina, which I think actually gets overhyped for the scenic views that it has. I think everybody has seen that one really good picture on social media of their baseball stadium, and they're just like, oh, this place is beautiful. This is awesome. I'm not going to be like Texas A&M yell leader and crap on App State that much, but everybody has things that make them look good. Just you get the right picture, you can look good. Well, he decided to call Kid Brewer Stadium of App State a gym. In return, he decided to call Kyle Field a dump, which, look, no disagreements here, whatever, probably is. I've never been there. Then he wanted to point out that Michie Stadium, where Army plays, okay, great, where 5 people watch Army play football every year, is a gym. His dump was Bill Snyder Family Stadium.
I have heard people speak very highly, though, of the atmospheres at the Naval and Army academies. I've heard, especially Navy. Where Annapolis, is that how it's pronounced? Yeah. I've heard people say really good things about Annapolis and say it's very pretty.
Well, Kenny Amatololo, he might be losing his job soon, so maybe you could put in an application. You could go be the coach there or something.
Hey, I have said the best job in America is that of being a fired football coach. So if that means I'm the fired football coach at Navy in 14 months, I'm probably doing all right with that buyout.
You and John Gruden can hang out together or something.
I would not want to hang out with him. There's maybe Dan Mullen. He's on TV now.
Yeah, I don't know. So
Jimbo Fisher?
Well, Scott Frost, we know you could go hang out with him. Jimbo might be on his way there. I don't know. Jimbo's going to get fired for setting expectations for himself that were actually never obtainable at Texas A&M. Although I guess I can't really say that. If you keep hauling in all these great recruiting classes, you should probably actually win with those players. But I don't know. We'll see. And real quick, I'll just make this point here. I think the Army-Navy game is the most overrated football game that gets played every year. So I'm sorry. I love living in this country. I'm very appreciative of what the Army and Navy and what they do for us, as a military, but I could care less about what they do for us on the football field.
It is not the brand of football that I enjoy watching, but I will say this. It is the one football game on. It is the one college football game on that weekend, and I enjoy the hell out of turning on CBS at that afternoon. The weather is always terrible for that game, I feel like, too. I can't feel like I've ever watched that game and it's been, sun shining. I feel like it's always overcast or raining or snowing or something. I don't enjoy the triple option. I don't think it's very entertaining to watch, but I will say I do kind of enjoy that game and the pageantry of it.
I just wanted to get that take out there so people were aware of it, because it's kind of one of those like eye-popping things whenever somebody sees or hears that I've said that I don't like the Army-Navy game. I just don't get it. And I think people are like really over the top into it. And it's like, it's bad football. Like if I want to watch a 6-3 final score, I'd go watch hockey or something. All right, so back to Pat Forde. He said that Bill Snyder Family Stadium is a dump. It's in the Little Apple, which is a bad place to start, and the castle-like structure added onto one side only reinforces the fact that the rest of the stadium is quite ordinary. All right. What is your thought of Bill Snyder Family Stadium? You are new, and would you classify it as a dump?
It is better than Ross-Ade Stadium, which is where Purdue plays. I saw that one last year when I was on the Illinois beat. I wouldn't consider it a dump. It's definitely been upgraded in the last couple of years. A few upgrades from what I understand, obviously in the north and the south end zone. And then the west side of the stadium has been renovated too. And I think the concourse area is very nice in each end zone. And then on the west side, I haven't been over on the east side yet. I enjoy the press box, even though it's a little bit cold over there. Or up there, I guess I should say. I wouldn't classify it as a dump. Is it one of the most picturesque stadiums in the sport? I don't think many Kansas State fans would argue that. I think people are realistic enough to know that, hey, like, it's probably not as picturesque as the Rose Bowl. Like, very few places are. Or, I don't know, like Notre Dame Stadium is a pretty picturesque environment, I guess you could probably say. But no, like, I don't think you can classify it as a dump. But then again, I haven't been to very many college football stadiums, so I don't really know how it compares. But I wouldn't say it's a dump. It's been renovated a few times.
I've been to more places on here that like were not listed that should be classified as dumps, and they were not classified as dumps. So the fact that like Pat Forde could get to the point where he's calling Bill Snyder Family Stadium a dump before some of the other dumps in the Big 12.
I would argue the environment, the game day environment of it alone probably upgrades it ahead of the dump category at the very least. Like,
yes, exactly.
The tailgating is very good. I've been very impressed with that.
And what do you think of the setting? Like, obviously on the north side of the stadium, you look out, you're going to see some fields. You're going to see a very Kansas-like environment. But you look south and east towards campus, it's a beautiful view. You get to see all the buildings and the hill and everything else.
When you look out over like that northeast corner, when we're up in the press box, you can kind of see some big hills and things. What do you Kansans call those? Mountains? Is that what those are called, or no?
No, we don't. We just in Manhattan we refer to them as hills
because large hills.
You got big hills in Manhattan. You got Manhattan Hill, which is the one that says Manhattan on it. I'm sure you've seen it.
Good to know. Point. Yes, I have seen that one. Yes.
Yeah. So it's pretty easy to remember.
KS on it. Is that K-State Hill?
No, it's just got a big KS on it. And somebody's probably a better historian on this than I am. Nobody can actually tell you if it's supposed to stand for Kansas State or if it's supposed to be like the Kansas to Manhattan, Kansas. So I don't really know the whole story behind that one. And look, I wasn't like a trendy kind of student when I was at K-State. So I only knew it was Manhattan Hill, but I never like went up there or anything. Like I don't do anything fun with it.
We should do a podcast live from Manhattan Hill sometime.
I'll probably pass. I love Manhattan, but I love it for the reasons that I love it. I don't really have to do any of the cool stuff, but I just think a dumb thing to say by Pat Forde. Like, and here's the weird thing. I don't understand how this one came to be like what he referred to as a dump. And then on top of that, he admits that he hasn't been in Manhattan since 2012.
My thing,
which 2012 was the last year that before they renovated the stadium. There were literally giant cranes up in 2012 to get construction started when the final horn went off against Texas that season. So
my thing is why are you doing this? Like, why are you ranking the best and biggest dump stadiums in college football? Like, you're Sports Illustrated. Like, don't you have more like desirable things to write about right now than that? I feel like you should be writing about things that are higher on your chain of priorities.
Yeah, I don't know that this does seem like a much more like off-season type thing, but that's fine. I get it. Yeah, he's in the content creation business like we
I
are.
mean, he definitely drew a lot
But
of clicks.
at the very least, like make sure that like the content isn't dumb, like calling Bill Snyder Family Stadium a dump, because it's not a dump. You don't have to call it a gym. You don't have to call it a dump. Just let it be its thing, which is a perfectly fine stadium that is really nice and whatever else. But we can move on from there.
Here's
And
the thing
going
too.
after everybody.
Here's the last thing we're gonna say. Every person who has gone to college, every single person who's gone to college, thinks that their college football stadium, their college football basketball, or the college basketball stadium, and their campus are like the three most incredible places in the entire like stratosphere of college environments in the entire country. Like, I went to the University of Illinois. I think going to State Farm Center to see a basketball game is an incredible place to watch a basketball game. But I think nationally, a lot of people would agree with that. I think you ask a USC football fan, they'll tell you that going to the Coliseum is the best place to see a college football game. I've seen pictures of the Coliseum in the last decade. It's not very full. When USC is good, I'm sure
Would you
there's
call
a lot
it a
of
dump?
No, see, now I would not call the Coliseum a dump because I think the Coliseum is one of the most historic stadiums in America. Like, you got, like, come on, man, the Olympics were there. I can't call it a dump. Yeah. But like, I'm not naive enough to be like, man, Memorial Stadium in Champaign, that is an awesome place to see a college football game. It's not. They very rarely get over 45,000 people in the stadium. It's like, it's old. It's been renovated. It's like 2007, 2008 renovated. But like, I'm not going to call it an awesome place to see a game. Like, I'm realistic enough about that. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, I think Kansas State fans are realistic enough to be like, okay, yeah, Bill Snyder Stadium, awesome place to see a game. Is it Alabama? Is it T-Town? Is it Jordan-Hare Stadium at Auburn? No, probably not.
That's
but is it
close?
Is it the worst place on the planet to see a football game? Absolutely not. There's no way it's that bad.
I think I think K-State has a great football environment, and I think the stadium itself is good. I think that the campus is beautiful. So you did hit on those two things. I think a lot of K-State fans would admit, though, that like Bramlage, when it's full and when K-State is good, like it is a fantastic basketball environment. But as a venue itself, it is certainly nothing special. And I think a lot of people would tell you that they would like K-State to have like a different type of venue to play basketball in than Bramlage, because it's just one of those things that, came up. Like, you have this stretch basically from like the 80s to the 2000s that when stadiums and arenas were built, they were all built on kind of this same model. And it's just like, we're just going to try and fill as many seats as we can in this area. And it's just going to basically be all concrete. Doesn't really matter how it looks. We now know that that's not really the case. Like, people like for there to be like some character to stuff and everything else. So I think people would at least be level with you on the side of Bramlage.
And I would like to say I have been very impressed with this fan experience at the first two home games. And that includes how bad the weather was against Mizzou. Like, I'm coming from a place where, like I said, there's not very often 45,000 people inside the stands in Champaign for football games. There's just not. It's not a very passionate football fan base. It's a very passionate basketball fan base. But I've been very impressed with the fan engagement. I find them to be very knowledgeable fans. They cheer when they should cheer. They cheer when they are trying to mess up the other opponent. They cheer when the penalties are going their favor. Whatever, they get upset when things don't go their favor.
It's not a crowd of soccer moms, that are just there to like.
Yeah, it's a very smart, educated fan base, and I don't say that lightly because I think there's a lot of fan bases out there that maybe are not that way. But I have been very impressed with what the environment has been like for the first two games, and I am only excited to see how it improves as Big 12 play kind of approaches, with this being the last home game of the non-conference season against Tulane this weekend.
Yeah, and with Tulane coming to town, they're 2-0. There is a lot of unknown to what Tulane is going to be this year. It was, interesting getting to talk to the different people involved with the different schools that have come to Manhattan now. And the word on Tulane was, we really don't know what they are yet, because they've played two terrible teams, UMass, who has been surprisingly worse than Kansas over the last however many years at football, and then an FCS opponent in Alcorn State. So there's not really a whole lot to grab from how good or bad is Tulane right now. And then you can't really base anything off of what they did last season as a whole because they went 2-10, which one seems to be out of the ordinary for Willie Fritz, and two, they seem to have been very heavily impacted by Hurricane Ida, which I didn't realize the full extent of it. Obviously, I realized that a hurricane had happened and stuff that goes on with that, but they were relocated for well over a month to a totally different state and trying to get prepared and do all the other stuff they had to do. And then when they had returned, once the hurricane and everything had happened, their dorms had basically been broken into and stuff had been taken and vandalized. And so there was a bunch of stuff that went down last season with Tulane that they were also having to try and play football throughout. Didn't really work out. They had the close game against Oklahoma. It was probably helpful that it was the start of the season. They were able to get up for it, be excited, but then the reality of everything set in as the season moved forward. That seems to be the vibe with them. But they do have two very talented players on offense. Their quarterback, Michael Pratt, is a 3-year starter now, and he can throw the ball. He's nearing 5,000 career passing yards. And then in addition to that, they have Tyjae Spears at running back, who is a very good runner of the football. So they will have some guys offensively that can get some things done. The question is going to be, what does the defense look like? And I don't know what the full answer is going to be there because not even Tulane or any of the people that are around them on a regular basis know what Tulane is going to actually be able to bring to the table on Saturday because they haven't played anybody. And it looks like K-State hasn't really played anybody either, by the way. Like, K-State has been impressive in what they've done, but we don't know what they're really going to look like against Tulane. I think they'll probably win in similar fashion the first two games, but we certainly don't know what they're going to look like when they finally get stacked up against Oklahoma in 2 weeks. So it's going to be a fascinating watch this weekend, and that's why I think the best avenue of attack for K-State is just to go out there and try to put the hammer down on Tulane and finish things off early.
Yeah, Mason, I think you make a really good point there about Kansas State not really playing anyone in the first 2 weeks. And yeah, they had an SEC opponent in Mizzou on their schedule, but Mizzou, quite frankly, might be the 13th or 14th best team in the SEC this year. I mean, the only team that I feel like compares to them currently is Vanderbilt, and we've obviously seen how much Vanderbilt has struggled in the last couple of years, but what Clark Lee's kind of done with Vanderbilt in the first 2 weeks of the season is a little bit inspiring. Obviously, what they did to Hawaii was great, but Hawaii is awful. So to kind of see how that Mizzou game went, I don't know how you feel about that if you're Kansas State in the long run. Like, great, you pounded an opponent that you really wanted to win against, but it also feels like it maybe didn't prepare Kansas State well enough for what they could see in Big 12 play with higher quality opponents coming in to Manhattan or traveling on the road, right? Like, those are things that you want to be tested a little bit in the non-conference if you have to be, and you don't think that you should be tested this weekend against Tulane. And yeah, like you said, I mean, Pratt's obviously a talented quarterback. He's got impressive numbers, 46 touchdowns in his career, just 16 interceptions. And then obviously at tailback, like you said, with Spears, I mean, he's another talented runner. 15 career touchdowns as a rusher. He had 9 of them last year, right? So you just don't feel like you're going to be tested a bunch this weekend, especially at the line of scrimmage. And when you're not tested highly at the line of scrimmage, you tend to dominate games. So it's tough for Kansas State. And I feel like that Oklahoma game could potentially be like a wake-up call of like, okay, we're playing big boy football now. But you also get the luxury of probably getting through your non-conference slate, mostly healthy, and feeling good about yourself and feeling confident about yourself sitting 3-0 as long as you handle business against Tulane like they should this weekend.
Well, and then kind of looking around at some of the other things that are going to go on for Tulane. Defensively for the Green Wave, they have former K-Stater Lance Robinson in their secondary. So they have a handful of transfers that have been able to kind of come in and help them out, which is to be expected basically now with how college football works out. But I just think that this feels to me like one of those deals where Tulane might have more offensive talent than what the last two teams had that they faced, or at least in the case of Missouri, Tulane might know how to use their talent a little bit better at this point in time. I mean, Brady Cook is still a sophomore, and it was wet and everything else. Luther Burden, they still, even though it seemed like they wanted to try and find different ways to get him the ball, they really didn't. I mean, he had 2 touches in the game?
He finished with 9 total yards.
Yeah. So, yeah, he had 1 catch and 1 carry in the game, which you're giving him the ball for a carry. Like, you think, okay, they're trying to find ways to get him involved. but they didn't really try that hard. So I think that Tulane will at least have an idea of how to use their offensive firepower in this game better than the first two opponents. And I think that they've got a coach in Willie Fritz that he's been able to do enough stuff to get Tulane to kind of tread water over his time there. That he might be a little bit more well equipped to play this game than what Eli Drinkwitz was last week. So we'll see where it goes from there. I think this is just another one of those games, though, that for K-State, like, you're focused on yourself. It's no matter what the other team does, it's not going to have any outcome in this game. It's going to be about what you do. Like, even if Tulane plays the best game that they can, as long as you take care of yourself as K-State, you're going to be fine. You're going to be able to win this game. So I think it comes down to probably put the ball in Deuce Vaughn's hands early and often, get your 14-point lead, start to let things breathe a little bit, and then offensively try to find a way to get this wide receiver quarterback passing game figured out in a hurry, because you are certainly going to have it ready to go at some point this season and probably the following week at Oklahoma. So I think it would just be best if they get their early lead, do it however you feel possible. And then once you've done that, it's when it's time to experiment a little bit. But it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like, I don't want them to get up 14 points or whatever and then all of a sudden decide Adrian Martinez is going to throw the ball 35 times. Like, don't do that. But just maybe take a few more shots, be a little bit more careless with some things, and try to make bigger plays happen, because I think you got to ease people's minds on that side of things. Because the other stuff, like, I'm not even really too worried about the passing game, but penalties have been a killer too. I'm not too concerned about the penalties, honestly, at this point, just because they've got so many experienced guys here. Like, I think early in the season, that stuff happens. They'll get it taken care of. And at the very least, they proved last week that when they committed the penalties, at least defensively, they were going to come out and respond to it. Offensively, penalties kind of killed them and took them out of, maybe a touchdown or field goals at points. But I think that they'll be in good shape there. So I don't know how you feel about what the offense should look like for K-State this week.
Yeah, I would maybe attack things a little bit differently than you would. I might try and come out and throw the ball a little bit more early and see if you can get your 14, 20-point lead that you were kind of talking about, and then you run the ball a little bit more. I think we think back to those first 3 drives against Mizzou last week. We saw Kansas State kind of come out and throw the ball a little bit more before it kind of started to rain a lot. Because remember, it was dry when that game kicked off last week, and Kansas State was able to kind of come out and throw it a little bit with Adrian Martinez. He had 2 or 3 completions on that first 2 or 3 drives, and I think he eclipsed 50 yards or something like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Colin Klein, the offensive coordinator, come out and do a few things like that in the passing game, and then you kind of see them transition a little bit to the rushing attack with Deuce Vaughn. And I wrote earlier this week that I think Kansas State needs to have some sort of emergence of a second running back. And I know there's been some discussion on the message boards of, well, they know DJ Giddens is their second back. Coach Kleiman has said, like, he's our undisputed number 2 back, right? But they haven't used him like he's a number 2 back. He only had 1 or 2 carries against Mizzou, and I understand why they kind of used that reasoning with the rain. They didn't want to put him in there cold, wet, whatever. Wanted to make sure he kept his confidence high. Didn't have the ball slip out on any fumbles or anything, right? Like, all of that makes a lot of sense to me, and I respect all of that. But at some point, they're going to need DJ Giddens to become a legitimate second ball carrier for them, because I don't think it's going to be sustainable for Deuce Vaughn to be carrying the ball 25, 30 times a game, 35 times a game once Big 12 play comes around. He's going to get dinged up. He's going to have some sort of nagging injuries, and God forbid he has some sort of serious injury that keeps him out a few weeks for Kansas State's point of view. Like, that would be really bad. Then I don't really know where your offense goes from there if you lose Deuce Vaughn. So you need to find some sort of second running back that can really contribute to the attack for Kansas State, in my opinion, to really feel good about what they're doing in the rushing game, because you know what you have in Deuce Vaughn, right? Like, he's got 8 straight games of 100 yards, 8 straight games with at least 1 touchdown. That's great. You know, with Adrian Martinez in the rushing game, you can run him out, read options, rollouts, what have you, probably 4 or 5 times a game. He doesn't want to run as much as he did in his Nebraska career, but he's still willing to do it. And he admits that he is talented at running the football. But you want to have a third guy, I think, and particularly a second guy in that running back group that you can rely on to get you, 30, 40 yards a game. DJ Giddens doesn't need to be giving you 70, 80 yards a game. Absolutely not. You've got Deuce Vaughn. But if he can give you 30 yards a game and, I don't know, 10, 15 touches, is that a fair expectation for the second running back behind Deuce?
I think around 10 is maybe like where you would like it to be to just get Deuce off his feet more. I will say this: I'm not as worried about it as you are, because I've seen it the last 2 years and how it's looked like with Deuce. Because I've told this to you. I asked him about it and everything else. He takes hits better than anybody that I've ever seen, and I think that there's something to the size of his body where it sounds counterintuitive, where in football you want to be bigger, faster, and stronger than everybody else. Deuce is smaller than a lot of the guys that are out there, basically everybody. But I think in some ways he's got an advantage in that. So I think he's shown that he can be durable, surprisingly, based off of his stature versus everybody else. But I would also agree that it would be nice if they could get DJ Giddens involved a little bit more, because we've seen that at K-State, since Chris Klieman came, they would like to be able to have another option that can step in and do something, whether that's, the first year that Chris Klieman was here, James Gilbert was the lead back, but Jordan Brown had moments where he was going to be able to do something. And then when guys were injured, Harry Trotter was there and was able to kind of step in. So I think it would be nice if you could have DJ Giddens to where if you've got a long drive going and say you've had, 6-7 plays already, and it's second down, you trust DJ Giddens enough at any point in the game, whether it's the first series of the game or the last series of the game, to put him out there. That's where I agree with you. I think it would be nice if you could. It doesn't have to be constant, and that's what I think people are maybe misunderstanding. Is it's not like you're saying that there should be a 50-50 split between
Absolutely
Deuce Vaughn and DJ Giddens.
No.
It's more so like you're looking at this from the logical football side of the more touches you get in this game, the more of a chance there is that you're going to get dinged up. And K-State absolutely can't have that with Deuce. So I think it would be nice if they could get to a spot where it's just proven that DJ Giddens can get a couple of touches earlier in the game, and it doesn't feel like, all right, the game's been decided, now he's out there. So maybe that's something that we might watch for against Tulane this weekend. And Chris Klieman talked about it this week. Like he addressed it and just kind of said, hey, here's the reason why it's worked out the way it has. And I do get that. Like, I get why it has worked out. I think the first 2 games of the season have been really weird for him and how to work this thing out. Like,
especially on offense.
Yeah, it sucks that in game number 1, like, it wasn't fully put away, but like you didn't want to do anything too crazy because Missouri was coming to town the next week, and it's supposed to be this SEC team, and they're supposed to be good and everything. So you don't want to try anything crazy. So you just say, let's lock it in, lock it down. And then you get the bad weather, and not just bad weather, but delays and everything last week. So and that's where you have to deal with it. It's football, but I feel like K-State's been dealt a crappy hand to start this season. And that's why I think they need a perfect weather condition afternoon game on Saturday to be able to go out there, do exactly what they want to do, get everything figured out, and feel very, very comfortable going into the game against Oklahoma, as opposed to right now where I think they just probably feel good. They think everything's gone well for them, but I think there are still some things that are question marks, and you'd like to be able to check some of those boxes this weekend.
Yeah, I think you said it very well there. I just think you want to be able to come out and establish confidence and establish a rhythm offensively that you maybe haven't been able to do in the first 2 weeks in areas that you want to be able to attack defenses. And at this point, too, I get it. After the first week or that first game, you're trying to be in a situation where, you're not trying to show your entire playbook. I get that same situation, right, in week 2, if you don't have to show your entire playbook. But if you're going into week 4 and you haven't had an opportunity to show your entire playbook, that means you haven't hit on a certain set of plays in game atmosphere at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I think you want to be able to hit on. Like, I think you want to be able to throw, or at least have confidence in what your full playbook is entering that Oklahoma game, and know what works in a game, knows what doesn't work in a game. Because you can run however many times you want in practice a certain play. And sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not. But ultimately, like, game atmosphere is just different. And if I was Kansas State, if I was Colin Klein, I would want to have confidence in what I know is going to work and what I know is not going to work heading into Big 12 play, which is obviously just a week away.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So we'll see how it goes. Offensively, I think that they're the key things when it comes to, I guess, scoring. would be the way I'd put it, more so than just offensively, because special teams comes into this with the kicking situation. You want to see some bigger things happen between the passing game with Adrian Martinez to Malik Knowles or Phillip Brooks. Either of those guys, I don't think we're going to get it from anywhere else. I mean, one of the hot topics has been through the start of the season, what's the status of a guy like RJ Garcia or Keenan Garber or some of these other guys getting involved? I just don't think it's going to happen this year, or at least it's going to be a while until it does happen. I think there's that big of a gap right now, which is slightly concerning because it's not like Knowles and Brooks have been killing it from an offensive standpoint. But I think that they can get there. It's just right now, those are the guys that have to be the emphasis. And then I think when we think about special teams, like everybody's asked me this, I don't know your thoughts necessarily. How worried are you about what you've seen from Chris Tennant as the kicker to start the season? Missed two extra points, 2 field goals in each of the games.
Well, I mean, like we said on that episode on Sunday when we were talking about, the success he's had or maybe the lack of success he's had this season, I just want him to be automatic from like 45 yards in if I'm a Kansas State fan, if I'm K-State staff. Like, I don't need you to be drilling 50-yard kicks. Now, if you can make those with semi-regularity, great. But if you're automatic from inside 40 yards, I think I would feel pretty confident what my kicking game has been. The problem is he hasn't been that this year. He's obviously made 50% of his field goals. He's made 2 of 4 on the year. That's obviously not incredibly inspiring at this point. He's made, 8 of 10 PATs? I think that's right.
Yeah,
he's missed
8
2.
of 10. Yeah, 8 of 10.
And obviously those need to be automatic. And I'm not a special teams expert at all. But those are things that you want to see made on a routine basis.
We'll see, I guess, where it goes. Defensively, I don't even have anything to say about the defense. Like, they've just been
I was going to ask you.
Everybody's just flown.
What do you even want to see out of the defense this week? Because I don't know. Like,
I think the only thing,
State, I'm like, what more can they show to make me think they're good?
The only thing that you can ask for, that because this is just one of those like tangible things that people can see it and they go, oh, okay, defense is playing good, is like when you get pressure, finish the job on the quarterback. But again, it's been weird this year where, like, with the weather and everything else, like they haven't necessarily maybe had as many opportunities to have just like a true rush of the quarterback, but maybe a couple more sacks or something, like exploit that. But the defense has been really good, and I don't think you can complain too much about it. I mean, they'll have probably every 3 or 4 drives, they've let their opponent, whether it's South Dakota or Missouri, both kind of get in a rhythm where they have a big play or two and they get big chunks of yards. And I have felt like at times they've been aided by some drops. Both South Dakota and Missouri dropped some balls at different points. So maybe lock things up in coverage a little bit better, but they've done a really good job. Like, that's not me saying that there's any complaint there. Like, this is just, you have to nitpick with this defense right now because they've been so good to start the season. So until they really have any flaws against anybody they play, I think just keep doing what they're doing. And maybe my only other concern would be that after a big game where you get 4 interceptions last week, that maybe you get like too infatuated with forcing turnovers to where you rely on it a little bit more. Like, Kobe Savage made a heck of a play to get that interception that he had. But if he was like a half second off of getting that pick, it was a touchdown for Missouri. Like, they were getting burnt pretty good there. So I would just, maybe if they're a little bit careful on that and don't let that get to their head on the turnovers, they'll be fine. But I can't add anything to it because they've played phenomenal, and I did not expect that to be the case at the start of the year. I was worried about what basically everybody behind the defensive line was going to look like, and they've been the strength of this team. Like, if you ask somebody right now that didn't know anything about it, they'd say, oh, K-State's defense has been awesome this year. So we'll see how they look against Tulane, and then obviously I think they get through that in a pretty solid manner, and it's going to come down to what they end up doing to start conference play at Oklahoma.
Yeah, I guess my thing, if to add on the defense and what you said there, I kind of like what you hit on there with the turnovers, or the takeaways, I guess would be the proper term. Don't become a defense that becomes too reliant on takeaways to get off the field. It's better to be a defense in 2022 that gets off the field because you get stops on third down than it is to be a defense that forces a bunch of takeaways. Like that is, in my opinion, a fact. Like I've seen it because like thinking back to like 2019 Illinois, right? Like that was a team that I covered. That team got a ton of takeaways. I think they were top 5 in the country in takeaways that year. And then 2020, they returned that entire group of defensive players more or less, and they're not able to get takeaways, and the defense resorts back to being really bad. You don't want to become reliant on takeaways for getting off the field. Getting off the field on third down is significantly more important because you're going to have more opportunities in that situation to get off the field and get the ball back to your offense. And I think you can kind of compare this a little bit, Mason, to what we've seen with Iowa's defense. While Iowa's defense this year has been really, really good in their 2 games, obviously the first being against South Dakota State and the second being against Iowa State, maybe not the 2 most explosive offenses that they're going to play this season, but last year they were the best defense in the country at getting takeaways. And this year, I don't know where they rank, but I'm sure it's not as high because they were incredible last year at getting interceptions. And they're just probably not going to finish the same way. And we've seen the kind of effect that it's had on their offense and their scoring output for Iowa this year. So if you get to a point where if you're Kansas State and you've got an opportunity to get off the field on third down, consistently doing that, I guess would be something that you would continue to want to do this year, taking advantage of those third and longs if you're the defense. Winning second down is something that I don't think is talked about enough in football in general. People always talk about winning first down and winning third down. But one thing that I've been really impressed with Kansas State this year, right, is they win first down and then they've done a good job on second down. So they're forcing, a 3rd and 6 or a 3rd and 7, which is obviously kind of manageable, but it's still difficult for the offense in terms of the plays you have to run. Winning second and third down is something that I would continue to want to stress if I was Joe Klanderman, the defensive coordinator for K-State, because those are key plays. Those are key downs getting off the field. And, 3 or 6, 9 plays is really, really important.
Well, that kind of goes to how I view, just winning stuff in general is it, like in your case, okay, you won first down, but winning first down doesn't mean anything if you can't win second down. And
Correct.
like that, I always have said, okay, great, like you got a big win, but the big win doesn't mean anything if you don't follow it up with a win the following week. So like, for example, 2019, K-State went and they beat Oklahoma. And it was a big deal. They put up all these points. What a game, whatever. Doesn't mean anything if you don't show up the next week and handle KU. And they went on the road and they throttled KU, and it was all this. It was a big deal because there was supposed like buzz and good direction in the KU program, which turned out to be false. And so like it's the same thought that I have about KU football for this weekend. All right, you got your big win at West Virginia. Now, don't go down to Houston and lay an egg, because if you lay an egg there, then you're kind of back to square one, and I have more questions about you than I do answers. So I think for K-State, they've done a great job. I think it's great that you point out the second down success that they've had, because I think when you think about it, what that comes down to is dudes are just flying around to make plays left and right, and it doesn't matter the situation or the spot they're in. It's just constantly like these guys know how to move. And I know Gabe talked to Cameron Salas, who's going to be in town this weekend on an official visit, a defensive back that's already committed. And he had quote after quote in that story that I think people will love, but he talked about the defense and basically was just like, have you seen how they've played this year? Like they've played like the real deal. So I think they've been impressive there. One note about the defense, they are currently top 5 in the country for points allowed per game at 6 a game. Tulane is number 2 though. They're tied for second. 5 points a game allowed by Tulane this season, while Georgia is giving up 1.5 points a game this year. So the Cats and Georgia and Tulane, they're all one and the same this year.
Yeah, Georgia's defense last year was obviously one of the greatest that we can use in the last decade with some of the players and the success they had. Obviously, Lewis Seen, N'Kobe Dean, Jordan Davis, those are all really good players. So to expect that kind of production out of Georgia again this year is kind of ridiculous, but I think it's one of those things where I expect Kansas State to still be near the top of those defensive rankings after this week, because I do think they're going to do a good job against Tulane. When you talk about points per game, right? Like they allowed 0 in the first, they allowed just 12 in the second. If you allow, 14 or less against Tulane this weekend, you're going to be averaging 13 points against through 3 games, right? I'm bad at math.
Okay, say that again.
Well, let me just pull out the calculator here. 14, if they allow 14 points this weekend against Tulane, I feel like that's fair. That's 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, that would
Plus 12, plus 0, that's still 26 divided by 3 actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that would
you're
end up
looking at
being
8.6 points a game. Like that's still going to probably rank in the top 10 in the country.
Yeah, that'll put you in a good spot. But well, I mean, I really don't know that there's a whole lot to add. I guess my one call that I would add to this, because we'll have our previews and predictions up as of Friday. So depending on when you listen to it, whether it's Thursday night or Friday, you'll be able to find those on email online. I've made a call already. I think Malik Knowles takes a kickback for a touchdown in this game. So they've already gotten a special team score off of Seth Porter's blocked punt, and Phillip Brooks took a punt back last week. I think Malik Knowles gets his kick return touchdown on Saturday against Tulane. So do you have any like bold predictions or things that you want to call right now so people look back and think you were on top of it?
Yeah, I'll give you one. A player that is not a quarterback completes a pass.
Oh, okay. Do you think it's going to be Cade Warner? Does he get a shot again? Quick redemption.
No, because I feel like that's been on film too much. So it's gonna be someone else. Like I think Tulane's probably like look out for the backwards pass to Cade Warner, and followed by a forward pass. So I'll say someone else. How many passes has he thrown in his career?
Cade Warner?
Yeah.
I don't know. That may have been the first time he ever did it.
And do you think that there is some disappointment in the fact that he's not a quarterback?
No, I think it's good that he's not a quarterback. I think it's more beneficial. I'm looking. He doesn't have. I mean, he still doesn't have a pass attempt basically because he didn't actually attempt the pass there. But yeah, I think it's good that he's not a quarterback.
I thought
because there'd be a lot more pressure.
I thought it was really funny on Tuesday, and we can get out of here shortly after this. I thought it was really funny on Tuesday when he was explaining that play, talking about looking off the backside safety. I'm like, wow, you are a quarterback's son stuck in a wide receiver position. Like, that's hilarious. Like, not very often when you talk about wide receivers or running backs making that play, are they talking about, oh, I knew I had to look off the backside safety over here so I could get Deuce open over here. And he was saying like, move so I can make the throw to Deuce. I thought that was hilarious because you never hear that. You never hear that candid type of response from players that aren't normally making passes. Because one, I don't think they generally know. Like, I think they just look and they're like, okay, open, not open. I'm going to pass it. I'm not going to pass it based off of what the situation is. They're not trying to look off the backside safety, which I just thought that was really funny.
Yeah, credit to Missouri. That's probably the best thing they did in the game was not leave Deuce wide open for Cade Warner to throw a touchdown pass to him. So we'll see. Well, here's the question now. So Cade Warner does not have a touchdown yet in his college football career. He played in a total of 16 games over 3 seasons at Nebraska, and he has now played in 10 games at K-State over 2 years, but no touchdowns. Does he throw or catch a touchdown first? Which one happens?
I will say catch.
Okay. All right. It may be this weekend because I think he's getting closer to it. So we'll see how it goes. Last thing we'll do, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I think we're going to do this to try and get you acquainted with K-State and Manhattan a little bit better. I've got some questions to throw your way, we're going to see what you know or what you don't know,
I don't know
and then give
yet.
you a little history lesson. So I'll start off with one. People love this. Do you know who the coach in between Bill Snyder and Bill Snyder was for K-State football? I've probably said his name around you a lot already. He's not very well liked in Manhattan.
You have said it a couple times. You gave me a good Kansas State history lesson. It starts with an O, doesn't it? Last name starts with an O?
No. Last name, think of like events that are happening in society right now. This word has been thrown around a lot lately because of something that happened overseas.
Well, the Queen died. Oh, Prince.
Ron Prince? There you go.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, Ron Prince.
Okay, there we go.
Ron Prince was the head coach in between Bill Snyder and Bill Snyder. A lot of other talk has been given time and time again about obviously Colin Klein and his history at K-State and being a Heisman finalist in 2012 and winning the Big 12 and everything that went with it. Do you know who the other big name quarterback in K-State history is. The only other quarterback to win a Big 12 championship.
Is it also someone who wore number 7?
Yes. Number 7 is a very important number in K-State football.
Okay, so the reason I know that is because when I was out here touring apartments before we were able to make this kind of transition public and everything, my dad and I, we went to eat at a bar. Is it called Go Power Cat Bar? It's over
a Power Cat Sports Grill.
Yeah, that's what it is. And they have that big mural on the wall when you kind of walk in of all the great Kansas State athletes throughout the years. There was 2 guys who I recognized. Colin Klein, actually. I didn't remember his name at the time, but I ended up looking it up while I was in there. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. But then the other one, I didn't recognize him. What's his name? That had to be back from 98.
98. Right? Well, you at least know the year, so that's good.
Okay. All right, here we go. Give me a third one. Give me a third one.
A third
I feel like I'm doing all right here. I at least knew his number.
You've kind of got the gist of it and everything. I was going to say this. So the number 7 is a very, very big deal. At K-State, a lot of great players have worn the number 7. And then last year, Skylar Thompson's final season, he was at K-State for 6 years. He switched from the number 10 to the number 7. So he
who was 7 this year?
I don't know. Does anybody wear 7 this year, or anybody that I should know off the top of my head?
So it's not like getting the block O at Ohio State.
It's not. Yeah, it's not to the point yet where it's like, oh, here you go. Like, yeah, nothing to that to that point yet. But it may one day get there where they say, hey, you've earned the number 7, or what, like when Devin Gardner was at Michigan and he was wearing the number 98 or something.
Yeah, I don't really know what that was, but that was weird. I mean, obviously LSU has a 7 thing with like Leonard Fournette, Tyrann Mathieu, Keyshawn Boutte.
Okay. I should have known this. Adrian Laura, freshman quarterback, has the number 7 this season. So either it means he's going to go on to do great things, or somebody's going to steal the number from him at some point if they try to give it off to somebody else. But he is wearing the number 7 currently. And then TJ Smith, who's a safety, wears it on defense. He has not gotten a chance to play a ton yet. He was a little dinged up, but TJ Smith, he likes to fly around the field and hit people very hard too. So when you finally get to see TJ Smith at full force, you'll be impressed by that. I'll have these better thought out. I thought of doing this like in the moment, that it would be good to try and get you acquainted with things. But I guess this will be more of a geography question. Do you know what the road is called that runs north of Bill Snyder Family Stadium?
Kimball.
Well, Kimball. You don't have to call it. You can slide it all into one word. Just Kimball. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. I have a question for you. There is a roundabout. Is that what y'all call them here? Or you call them traffic circles?
No, we call them roundabouts.
Okay, that's what we call them too, where I'm from. There's a roundabout over here, kind of off 4th Street and some other street I don't know the name of yet. There's a McDonald's, there's a Walgreens, and there's a statue of someone in the center of the roundabout. Do you know who that person is, and can you provide me some context? Because every time I drive by it, I'm like, who is that?
Look, I've gone around that roundabout a ton. I've never looked at the statue. I have to do some research on that to see. That is here's the backstory behind this, I guess. It would appear that is I don't know, I guess a guy that and it says the peace offering on the blue is a monument atop the pedestal in the 4th and Bluemont roundabout. So basically just
nothing of significance, really.
Well, I think it depicts a member of of the Kaw Indian tribe that was around there. So it was just kind of to show the history and importance there. You will notice that if you ever go to like City Park and you're around there, there's this giant statue of a guy, and you might think, oh, is that like Paul Bunyan or something? No, even better. It's a guy named Johnny Kaw. So just
who is Johnny Kaw? Why have I heard that before?
Well, it depends on how deep into Manhattan you've gotten so far. You may have heard of Johnny Kaw's, which is a bar in Aggieville. But Johnny Kaw is basically like Paul Bunyan. But that's why the story of him, he was created by a guy that was a professor at K-State, and it was kind of to celebrate 100 Years of Manhattan when it came about. So they had a bunch of stories that were made up about him. And so he's like this famed figure basically in Manhattan. So that's Johnny Caw. And there are some people out there that have Johnny Caw bobbleheads, which I'm actually jealous of. I wish I had a Johnny Caw bobblehead, but instead I've got we got Bill Snyder behind me back here. So there's Bill.
I love bobbleheads.
Then I've got a Darren Sproles one as well right here. That's back there. So
Darren Sproles was a fantasy football machine.
Yeah. Well, do you know anything else about Darren Sproles?
He went to Kansas State.
He did go to K-State. That is true.
Is he the shortest player in Kansas State history?
I don't know about that. He and Deuce are the same height though. They're both 5'6" or listed at 5'6". So can just left and right comparisons get made between those two, whether they're fair or not. But very exciting. Next, I promise you, when we do this to wrap things up over the weekend after the game, I'll have more well thought out questions for you.
Okay.
And I will try to diversify them. I will try to give you not just K-State questions, but also general Manhattan questions. Are there any other like Manhattan questions right now that you want me to answer, or you want people on like Twitter to answer for you?
No, I'm looking forward though to the quiz I get on Sunday, because I feel like I did halfway decent on the first two questions, so I'm looking forward to whatever you throw my way on the next day.
Yeah, no, you'll have to be on your toes and ready to go. So that'll do it for us. We will have plenty of coverage over the next couple of days over on EMA Online. Whenever you listen to this, maybe all that stuff is already up there, or maybe it will be coming in the very near future, but it'd be a great place for you to get caught up for game day and everything else going on. We'll both be out and about on Friday night at various high school events. I'll be at Wichita Heights watching John Randall, getting an update from him, and then Alec will be in Topeka for Washburn Rule and Casey Piper, which is a pretty big matchup. Obviously, Camden Beebe will be there, which is a significant deal, but also plenty of other guys that K-State has their eye on. So we'll have updates throughout the high school football landscape and everything else over the weekend as well. Then K-State and Tulane on Saturday at 2:00. That'll do it for Alec and I, and we will talk to you next time.